Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tasty Trails Travel Pod. This week is a special one for me. It's combining two things that are very, very close to my heart, pizza and Chicago. 77 episodes in, and I am finally heading home. I'm not actually from Chicago, more like an hour and a half away, but I did live there for a brief stint, and I always say that I'm from Chicago when I'm abroad because it's easier. But in general, the city holds a very, very special place in my heart. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that there isn't a strong enough word out there to describe how much I love pizza. So I'm really excited for this one today. But if you think Chicago pizza starts and ends with deep dish, you're about to learn why locals would strongly disagree. I'm joined today by Jonathan Porter, founder of Chicago Pizza Tours, and we're diving into the real story behind Chicago pizza, how deep dish came to be, what locals actually eat, and how neighborhood bars quietly shaped one of the most iconic food cultures in the world. I don't want to wait any longer because I'm too excited, so let's go. Hey, Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm really excited. This one is really close to my heart as I am from right outside Chicago, and pizza is my favorite thing in the whole world. So
That's awesome. Yeah.
very excited to talk to you. So can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Sure. So my name is John Porter. I'm the founder of Chicago Pizza Tours, a company I started in 2010, and we offer both bus-guided and walking tours of significant pizzerias. What I consider a significant pizzeria is if it's deep dish, it usually has something to do with the history of the invention of deep dish pizza, but then the other places are just really nice neighborhood places. And the original idea was to basically get people that were traveling to Chicago out of that downtown scene and take them out into the neighborhoods. Chicago's the city of neighborhoods. There's 77 neighborhoods or so, and really going to give them a crash course over the course of about 3 hours or so in what the culture of pizza is like in Chicago. So we've been running it for 15 years. We've had more than 100,000 guests at this point and spent millions of dollars on pizza. It's been a wild ride.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And do you eat pizza like on all the tours?
Yes, I get that question a lot, and I eat pizza a lot of times on the tours. Most of the time that these tours are running, and if I'm actually guiding it, it's over the course of when a meal would be, eaten, and I'm not going to get like a side salad or something like that and quickly wolf it down. So I do try to switch up where I'm eating pizza from. If I'm guiding like 4 tours in a given week, I'm going to try not to eat from the same place 3 or 4 times. So I do switch it up just a little bit, and then funny enough, it's like when I'm not guiding pizza tours, that's when I tend to eat more pizza because I'm trying so many different pizzerias. There are many, many pizzerias in Chicago, and you're never going to be able to try them all. There's a little more than 2,100 at this point.
Wow.
So I do make it a point to try a lot of really good ones and know because one of the things I guess I was unprepared for was that when we first started the tour, more than 40% of our customers were locals that just wanted to do a pizza tour in their own city. And they always had a recommendation or a place that they grew up eating that's in their neighborhood, whether it be the suburbs or a certain neighborhood of Chicago. And it was just kind of cool for me to be like, okay, well, this one's really good. I'll give it a try. I'd put it in my notes app and get to it eventually.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I guess that's so true. Yeah. So that's like, oh, the dream, eating that much pizza. So yeah. I guess let's start. I know a lot of people know Chicago for deep dish pizza, so I definitely want to talk about that. But there's also another kind of pizza. So can you kind of talk about both of those pizzas, like what they are and how they fit into Chicago pizza?
I mean, that's awesome. In general. Yeah, the way you phrase that and worded that question is amazing because 15 years ago when we first started, like the very first line of the tour was while that Chicago is known as the deep dish capital of the world, and that's true. For the most part, the locals really only eat it on special occasion or where people from out of town are visiting us. What we grew up on, for the most part, was a thin crust tavern-style pizza, which is a thin crust circular pizza that's then cut into squares. And when we talk about the more than 2,100 individual proprietors of pizza, more than 80% of them, at least going back to like 2010, more than 80% of them were doing that tavern-style pizza as opposed to deep dish. So the deep dish is something we're known for. It was invented here. It's synonymous with the city. You definitely need to have some when you come to Chicago. But to truly immerse yourself in the culture of what Chicago pizza scene is like, it's all about the tavern-style pizza.
It's so funny because when I first heard that, like, oh, like deep dish is for tourists, I was like, well, wait a second, like I love deep dish and I like eat it, like not infrequently. But then I learned what actual tavern style was, and I was like, oh, yeah, we do eat that like way more often. So I thought it was wrong, and then I was like, no, I've literally been doing that my whole life, and like not even
right.
realizing.
Well, what I love is when I deliver that line on the tour, and you have a bunch of people, locals they all start nodding and like chiming in, like, yep, like, and it's like, oh, it's almost like validating to the rest of the people from North Carolina, the people from Texas, and the people from Australia are like, oh, well, yeah, that's what they're saying too. So it is pretty cool. That is sort of like, we're 2 minutes into the tour, and I'm sort of uprooting what people visiting Chicago think of as pizza. Another point to that too is that like deep dish pizza, it's really special, right? It's a lot of dough, a lot of cheese, a lot of tomatoes. We eat a lot of pizza in Chicago. The culture of Chicago is pizza once a week, typically on Thursday or Friday night. And then it could be one other day in there if your life is hectic and busy and you're kind of moving around. If we were having deep dish pizza every single time, it's a bit much. So deep dish for the locals really is more special occasion. Or like I said, when people from out of town are visiting us. But yeah, day in and day out, mostly thin crust tavern-style. And then I would say this too. In like the 21st century, the culture of pizza really has shifted. It really started in like 2001, where you started getting these outside styles of pizza, like New Haven style, like artisan, New York street slice, even Quad City style and Sicilian and stuff. Really, what they did is they found a home, not so much downtown, but in the neighborhoods of Chicago. So that sort of elevated what Chicago pizza actually was and kind of sort of expanded the definition, I guess is what I would say.
So just in case anybody, because we have listeners from like all over the world, so just in case anybody doesn't know what a deep dish pizza is, can you explain what it is?
Sure. So a true deep dish pizza is going to be cooked in a well-seasoned pan. And everybody thinks that they're these big, heavy cast iron pans, but they're actually lightweight aluminum, and they have like an anodized coating around them. And when they first order these pans and get them in, they're nice, shiny, and silver. But it's up to them to sort of season these things before they're ready to start baking deep dish pizzas. And the way that they go about doing that is they cover the whole thing in olive oil, throw different types of spices on it, stick it in the oven by itself, and burn it for like an hour, pull it out, re-season it again, burn it again. Typically, it takes at least 3 days to properly season a deep dish pan. And then once they're done baking a pizza in that pan, they're not going to run this through a dishwasher or anything. A little bit of water, maybe some soap, and wipe it down, stick it back on the shelf, maybe put another fresh dough in there. And that way, the flavors of pizza that they cooked in the morning will continue to come through in the afternoon as well. So it starts with that pan, first of all. Then you take a dough that has a lot more oil in it than regular artisan or thin crust pizza would typically have. And that oil is actually what's going to make it a little bit more biscuity and crispy when the bake goes through. So you take some corn oil and you line the bottom of the pan with that. You plop down your dough right into the middle of the pan. And then by hand, you're pressing it down and you're spinning the pan so that you evenly start pushing the dough towards the edges. Then once it gets towards the edges, you use your fingertips, you go all the way around it and pull it up like a pie crust would be. Then you lay down slices of mozzarella, always slices on a deep dish pizza. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason, which I always thought was so that none of the liquidy sauce would get into the dough while it's cooking and sagify the pizza. And I know that's not a real word, but I continue to use it. One day it might be. But the second reason for it was for the application of sausage. Across the country, pepperoni is the number one topping, and by far. But in Chicago, it's all about sausage. So what they do then is they put about a pound of mozzarella all in slices, kind of just spiral it around there, and then they push that down so then they have a nice flat surface. Then they take the sausage, which comes in these big containers, and they grab a pinch of it between their fingers like this, and then they kind of whip it down like that right into the pan. And the reason that they do it like this, where they kind of whip it down like that, is because once the sausage hits the cheese, the grease or juice, whatever you want to call it, sort of splatters throughout there. So then when the tomato sauce goes on top of that, it sort of renders into that sauce, and you still get like that sausage flavor, even when you don't get a bite of sausage. So then the next step would be a California grown crushed tomato that goes on top. Sometimes it's a little bit chunkier. Sometimes it's a little bit liquidier. Depends on which pizzeria you're getting deep dish from. But it's just tomatoes and a little bit of salt, sometimes not even any salt. So when people on the tour ask me all the time, what's a good sauce recipe? I tell them, buy good tomatoes, lightly salt them. That's it. You don't got to, boil the ocean or something like this on that one. So, and then it bakes for like 30, 40 minutes or so. It typically, like the actual oven time of a deep dish pizza is somewhere between like 25 and 35 minutes, I would say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not bad at all, actually.
Right. It's the getting the order in, actually building the pizza, and then getting it into the oven space. That's what can really delay your pizza. Why it typically takes an hour when you go to a restaurant and you're looking to get a deep dish. But actual oven time, some ovens I've seen that are running hot could be, if you don't have like sausage on it, if it's just like a spinach deep dish or something like that, that could be done in about 25, 27 minutes. Sausage, you want to get it a little bit closer to like 35 minutes or so if you're cooking at 500 or something.
Okay. And did they start at the same time and kind of branch off, or how did the two styles kind of become synonymous to Chicago?
Well, they both have their own history, and we could spend a couple hours talking about each one of them. So I'll try to give you like the truncated version of it. We'll start with the deep dish. There are several stories for the deep dish, and what we had to do is we talked to people that were still around. That were family members that went back to when the deep dish pizza was created to try to get some stories, but none of the stories ever lined up. So then it took like some researchers. We had to make some assumptions and be like, okay, this part is most likely true. This part is probably not true. This part's definitely not true. Throw that one out, or something like when you would find some sort of proof, you'd be like, that one's not true. So, I mean, the original story of the deep dish goes back to Pizzeria Uno. What they would have listed was a guy by the name of Ike Sewell, a Texan, came to Chicago with a dough recipe. He wanted a pizza that was bigger and better, born out of the American ideal that it wasn't just something that went with the meal, it was the meal. Bigger is better. The street of Wabash that Uno's is on is honorary Ike Sewell Way. And what we found is history is basically written by survivors, and that might not be exactly the story. So then the second version that we came to was that Ike Sewell and his business partner, Rick Ricardo, wanted to open up this space there. And Ike was in the liquor business, and Rick had owned the building, and there was a tavern in the basement, and he was married, he had a baby girl. He didn't want a noisy bar moving in downstairs, so he was a restaurateur. He decided he'd open up the restaurant down there and do pizza. And the story was that like neither of them had any idea how to make pizza. So what they did is they found a guy by the name of Rudy Malnati Sr., the father of both Lou Malnati and Rudy Malnati Jr. And it was through Ike Sewell's direction that the first deep dish pizza was created in December of 1943 at what was originally called Pizzeria Ricardo down on Ohio and Wabash. And then eventually, Rick Ricardo passed away in 1954 of a heart attack. And that left Ike Sewell the opportunity to retire from the liquor business, pony up the $4,000, which was a researcher found this during the pandemic shutdown. The original partnership said if either one of them was to pass, the other could buy out the remaining shares for $4,000 and not what the business had accrued to be. He gets full control of the restaurant, turns it into just the pizzeria instead of Pizzeria Ricardo. And then it's not until a food writer writes an article saying the pizza there was better than anything he'd had in Europe during the war. Now you get tons of people flocking there, and they have to open up their second location. So they go one block north of there. They open up Pizzeria Due. That then leads them back to the first place where they call it Uno or Uno. So that's another mostly true story that we would have told. The unfortunate thing is that everybody has passed years ago. So we'll never know totally for sure. But there is a guy by the name of Peter Regas who is a very, very skilled researcher that has been able to help us chuck out what we know isn't true. And that leads us to more of what is true. So then the other part of that story, which mirrors the story I just told you, is that Rick Ricardo actually knew how to make pizza and that he was the first one to do the pizza in 1943. And the problem with this was he wasn't business partners with Ike at this time. The problem with this is he thought he could just get liquor from his other restaurant, Ricardo's on Rush. But we're on the brink of World War II. There was a time of rationing. The place itself was a speakeasy during the Prohibition, and it was impossible for him to get gin for his famous gin martini, and that's where all the money was. So about a year later in 1944, he went to Ike Sewell and said, hey, I need the booze. You are a vice president of Fleischmann Distilling. What can you do as far as getting gin into my restaurant? And that's when he said, make my wife Florence, in her maiden name, a partner for $4,000, and I'll be sure to get you all the booze you ever need. So it's kind of like a convergence of those last two stories where they sort of come together. And then unfortunately for Richard Navarrete, Rick Ricardo he changed his name when he came to America. And unfortunately for Rick Ricardo, he ends up dying of a heart attack in 1954. And then this kind of presents the opportunity for Ike Sewell to run with the Malnatis and change into Unos to Dues. And then interestingly enough, Lou Malnati by 1970 turns to him and says, what are we going to do? How are we going to make sure that what happened to Rick doesn't happen to me and my family? I'm married, I have kids. And that's when Ike says, no, you guys just work here. You're not partners or anything like that. So he goes and starts his own thing in 1971, which is probably the greatest thing to happen to his family generationally going forward, because they have more than 55 locations throughout the Chicagoland area. It's worth over $1 billion. I think 51% sold for an estimated $550 million or something like that. Unfortunately for Lou, he never really saw the full return on investment because he died of cancer in the late 70s. But, his family moving forward took over that sort of empire. And then that also leads to there's another split. So now there's Rudy Malnati Jr., and he was the one that goes out and starts Paisanos in 1991. And that's sort of our home base
Oh,
for, yeah, so that's our home base for the Pizza Doers. And, it has to do with that family history of the deep dish, and it's excellent pizza. It's on a smaller scale than the big name Lou Malnati's, but still with that Malnati name and that quality. So we really enjoy having that as our home base and showcasing their pizza, to our guests. So that would
well,
be sort of the truncated version of the deep dish. I'm sure that was a little bit more than you were thinking. I would say so.
that's so interesting. I had no idea. So like, well, and especially like when you were talking about like the Malnati's, I was like, wait a second, but like if they started Uno's, like I don't really get it. And like, yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't know all three of those were so intertwined. That's so
And what we do is we
interesting.
look at Pizzeria Uno. So I just call it Uno's to make it easier. But like
Yeah, yeah,
we look at Pizzeria Uno as sort of the trunk of the tree, so to speak. And as you kind of branch out from there, all these other pizzerias sort of came from there. So you've got the first competitor of deep dish is Gino's on Rush, which then
yeah.
becomes Gino's East. And that happens in 1966. So they had a pretty good head start before they got their first competitor. And in order to start Gino's, nobody knew how to make deep dish pizzas. So they had to steal the head chef from Pizzeria Uno, who at the time, her name was Alice Mae Redmond, African-American woman from Mississippi. And for the first time, a deep dish competitor comes out, we could tell that she wasn't happy with the Malnati dough that was going on at Pizzeria Uno, because it starts to change a little bit more like cornbread from the South. So that's the first time we see competition for deep dish. And then by 1971, 5 years later, Lou Malnati's now in the business. If we fast forward another 10 years, by 1981, a waitress that worked at both Pizzeria Uno and Due, her name was Louisa, she ends up basically deciding, I think I could do this myself. And she sees a space in Crestwood, Illinois, which is on the far south side of Chicago. And the newspapers called it having a baby at 60. And she went ahead and started Louisa's Pizza. So that comes from Uno's as well. And then you've also got Paisanos in 1991, Rudy Malnati from Uno's as well. And then if we take it even one step further, Bartoli's, which is a stop on the tour, owned by Brian Tontrick. He's the grandson of Fred Bartoli, one of the original founders of Gino's East. So that goes back to Gino's East, which then ultimately goes back to Pizzeria Uno. So it is sort of all this mess of a tree with tree branches and everything like that. So it is kind of
Oh my
cool to
gosh.
sort of trace all that. Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. That's really interesting. And especially for people like in the Chicago area, just know like all of those names like so well. And so, oh wow, that's so interesting. And then Tavern Pizza is like comes from like way before that, I
So, well,
imagine, yeah.
tavern,
Or,
it's sort of tough to like really trace what the very first taverns. So, pizza comes to Chicago in the late 19th century. You've got enough Italian immigrants that are doing it. It's important to note that pizza doesn't really become a business until like the 1950s. And it really starts to take off as a business by like the 1960s or so. Up until then, pizza had just been like, well, it's something that you would have at the Italian bakery. You'd go for some ingredients, you'd go for some breads or something like that. And then on the way out, you'd be like, yeah, I'll get a pizza as well. So traditionally thought of is Granado's on Taylor Street is the original first pizza in Chicago. And that's in the 19th century. And it's sort of just a bakery style Southern Italian pizza. So when we're looking at like the first actual tavern styles and how they sort of come into Chicago, one that I credit would be Vito and Nick's in 1945. They opened in 1920 as a tavern. And what's funny about that is in 1919, Prohibition gets passed, and everybody has 1 year to understand that it's going to affect in January of 2020. And from then on, the sale, manufacturing, and distribution of alcohol is illegal. And they open up as a tavern in like June of 1920. So that kind of
no.
gives you a sense for what Prohibition was like in Chicago. No one cared. So they were a bar for at least 25 years when Vito was the dad, Nick was the son. Nick had spent time in World War II, knew all about this pizza stuff. I feel like it's a combination of Nick wanting to do pizzas because he'd seen it in Italy. And then you also have, at this point, enough GIs that have returned from serving, and now they're asking their local old style bar to, make a pizza or so. And the people at these taverns, they weren't artisan bread bakers. They weren't pizza makers, which, pizza's not really a thing for anybody that's not Italian at this point. So they didn't really understand it. And it's almost like if you're playing the game telephone, right? Like you tell a secret to
Hmm.
somebody, they tell it to this one. And by the time it gets to them, it's sort of a Frankenstein's monster of that. So they were using like a good Midwestern flour, like a Sarasota, and then they would roll it out so that it was very thin and poke holes in it so that it wouldn't rise up because they didn't know how to deal with more bread. And then they would sauce and cheese it all the way to the edge. And the reason they would cut it up into squares was that these were taverns. They weren't restaurants. So they didn't have plates. They didn't have silverware. You would walk up there with the little cocktail napkin that your pint of old style would come on, and you'd grab a couple slices and head back to your seat. And these pizzerias sort of used that as a way to sell more beer, basically put a little more salt to it. And the pizzas were they were given out for free. And they never even really got the idea to start selling these things until people were like, oh, this is really good. I want to bring one home for my family. Can I buy one? And it's like light bulb goes off. So Jim and Pete's in the Galewood neighborhood, Vito and Nick's in the Ashburn neighborhood were two pioneers of that style. And then by the 1950s, you start to see more places opening up. And then by the 1960s, it's its own business, because now if you go to the phone books, they're not even listed under restaurants. Pizza gets its own section by like the mid 1960s or so. So it really
cool.
that's like the whole start of the trajectory of it going up.
And is that something that you see? Well, I guess obviously it continues on today, like the tradition of the tavern style pizzas and people just like going to their neighborhood tavern.
Right. So for a little while, I was actually a bit concerned because, by the time I started the tour in 2010, really the only pizzeria that I knew that was newer that was doing tavern style pizza was Flo and Santos, the second stop on our tour. All the places that were tavern style places, which were awesome, don't get me wrong, but these were old places that have been started in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And you're getting the situation where the dad doesn't want to run the business anymore. He's in his 70s or whatever, and the son has a job in tech and doesn't want anything to do with it or something like that. So we were starting to see places close like Sano's and John's on Western. And we weren't really seeing a lot of newer places because all the newer places were more interested in doing wood-fired, artisan, maybe even Neapolitan or neo-Neapolitan. They weren't truly doing tavern style pizza. So I was starting to get concerned that we're losing some of these gems and we're not reopening new ones. But within the last 5 years, tavern style has actually gone through a little bit of a renaissance, and we've got places that are now with young people that took an approach to tavern style pizza. And most Chicagoans, what they really like about the tavern style is how crispy it is. And there was this place called Pat's on Lincoln that cures the dough for like 2 or 3 days or so. And when they do that, the yeast dies and it really becomes as crispy as a saltine or so. And we've got this younger generation that took that and then started taking it to the extreme, curing the dough 5 days, 7 days, and then doing a really like good sauce that goes with it that kind of blends through the cheese. So we've got places like Zarella, which is our last stop on the downtown pizza walk, Pizza Michi, which is on Grand Avenue, and it's like one of the hottest restaurants to get in. I don't take tourists there, but I've been there a couple of times. So we do finally now have this tavern style kind of come back into the fold here, which is good. So it always just kind of ebbs and flows, and we'll see what the next trend might be.
Yeah, totally. And so how can people figure out if it's like a good tavern style pizza rather than just a bar that like makes pizzas? Is there anything that kind of gives away or like,
And actually I was telling people this weekend because my nephew had his 7-year-old birthday party at a bowling alley and they had pizza there. And I'm like, you walk into a bowling alley and it's hit or miss. It could be amazing pizza, or it could just be some sort of mass-produced terrible pizza. So, just kind of look around on the internet, get on the Instagram and start following some pizza people that are, I don't want to say influencers because I certainly don't consider myself an influencer, but like me and a bunch of people are sort of deeply rooted in this pizza community, and we're not going to have hundreds of thousands of followers, but the content that we put up there is hyper focused on like really good pizza. So I would be weary of the people that say, these are my top 5 pizzerias in Chicago right now. Like if they go into something like that, like I just go right past it. There's certain people that I sort of trust for that. So it can be tough to decipher, I would say.
And what about toppings? So like for the Chicago style hot dog, there are very specific things that like go on that make it its thing. Is there anything like that for Chicago pizza, like toppings wise, or is it more just kind of the style?
I mean, I think most of these places build their pizzas. Well, if we're talking tavern style pizza, most of these pizzerias build their pizza with the thought of sausage in mind first. And the reason I say that is because typically they'll undersalt the sauce and the dough, knowing that you're already going to put a salty sausage on there. So when you get the finished product, it's perfect the way it is. But I would say that the most popular pizza in Chicago is got to be the smog, which is sausage, mushroom, green pepper, and onion. Like it's on every single restaurant's menu, and they call it something else every time. But like that is probably the number one go-to. We still sell plenty of pepperoni. Pepperoni's a good, cheap meat, and you can flavor it and season it very well, and it's not going to break the bank for a lot of these pizzerias. So for them, it's a great way to make profit, and people love pepperoni. When it comes to deep dish, though, I do see a fair amount of spinach as well. Now, I will say sausage, green pepper, mushroom, onion, like those ones are probably the top sellers. But I do see a fair amount of spinach as well. We do a deep dish pizza at Paisanos that I find very flavorful. It's really good. It's a sort of a neutral one. Like when I first meet the group, and remember Paisanos is sort of my home base, right? So when I first meet the group, I have an idea of what some of the allergies are, some of the restrictions, but like when we sell 25 tickets, right, somebody might buy 4 tickets and they might give me their dietary restrictions, but not the third person in their group. So it's really sort of a blank, I got to kind of dive around it. So what we start out with is the Mark Special for their deep dish. And the Mark Special, it's a vegetarian-friendly option. I'm not a vegetarian, but if I was forced to become one, this is sort of my gateway into doing so. It's fresh chopped garlic, tomato slices, and basil. So it's almost like a margarita with some garlic added to it as well for a deep dish pizza. And it becomes very flavorful, very neutral. Just about everyone can eat that pizza. And then from there, I have them and I'm like, all right, what are we dealing with as far as allergies and how many vegetarians do we have and stuff? So that's one of my little tricks that I use.
Oh, yeah, you're making my mouth water. And it's funny when you're talking about the sausage for the tavern style. Yeah, it brings back memories of my childhood and the pizzeria that kind of the most famous pizzeria in my hometown.
Can I take a guess?
Yeah.
Which one you went to? Is it Capri?
We did go to that one, but there's a different one on the other side of town that we went to more.
Okay.
Do you know Lino's?
Oh yeah. No, I know Lino's too. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. They have they're like salad. They would put this like the sausage into that salad, and I was not one for to be eating a lot of salad, especially like in high school and stuff. And I would always go like straight for the salad because I was like eating up that sausage because it was so good.
Sure. Yeah, it's a salad,
Yeah,
just covered in sausage.
Yeah.
So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it brings back like such strong memories of eating pizza with my family and stuff. That's awesome. For you personally, what's your kind of favorite part of the pizza? Like, what makes a good pizza? Like, what's kind of the best part for you?
I mean, I feel like I think like I've moved past that sort of. I was always sort of like, looking at sausage pizza for thin crust and looking at, these. But I think for me, what I ultimately came to, because like, I was a huge pizza fan from my entire life up until 2010. Then I started the pizza tours in 2010, right? So now I have to like up my game and sort of now I'm immersed in this, not just like when I want to be, but like all day long as well. So for me, it's truly about balance, how the sauce, the dough, and the cheese, how they all affect each other, interact with each other, how it all comes together. That's sort of my measure for what it is. And we all have that, like, whatever the first pizza was that you ate that you truly like fell in love with, and that was like your go-to pizza, going out like Lino's for you, right? Like it was a place called Q's for me in Hillside. That sits in your subconscious back there. And like, whether you know it or not, when you're taking a bite of a pizza that you've never had before, you're sort of comparing it to that one. Maybe not apples to apples right there, but there is some sort of like comparison of how it makes you feel overall. So for me, it's about looking at the entire product and not just one part of the pizza, I guess.
Yeah, that's totally fair. It makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, like, so how did you, like, where does your love for pizza come from and kind of the passion? How did the tour, like, get started in the first place?
Part of it is just growing up in the Chicagoland area, having pizza be such a huge part of my life. But at the same rate, I was the one that started it, not everybody else. So like, for me, my earliest memories of pizza were, my dad was from Melrose Park. And I have a lot of cousins on that side, the Italian side. And we would always get together on Sundays and go to these mobbed up joints that were in Melrose Park that were, that no longer exist. They were burned down in the middle of the night with no product in it, but like these just taverns with jukeboxes and cigarette machines and the red and white tablecloths. And me and my 15 cousins are burning straws on the table and whacking back kitty cocktails, and the adults are having the adults are having red wine out of those little stubby glasses and catching up, and we're just fucking around with the jukebox and burning straws, and pies just kept hitting the table just to kind of keep us satiated. And those are sort of my earliest memories for pizza. Now, the reason I turned it into a career is I was in a job, family business doing promotional products. So anything you put a logo on, whether it's a hat, pen, and some of my biggest customers were tied to construction. And in 2008, the housing market, sort of crashed. I was still good for another year or so, but by 2009, it was pretty apparent that like what I was selling, it was going to take a lot of time. And I had invested in some real estate, and now both of those places were underwater.
Ooh.
I had my first kid, who's now 16 at this point, and I was sort of like, looking around, I'm like, well, what the hell am I going to do? And about a year prior to that, I had bought the website because I thought it was a good idea, and I couldn't believe that nobody had done it before. Let me see if I can start a Chicago pizza tour, and we'll see how this goes. But, I had a career and wife and kid, so it wasn't something I put on the forefront. But by April of 2009, it was pretty apparent that I needed to make a life change. So I took a job for the city of Chicago that summer, teaching tennis to kids in the afternoon, adults in the evening. And when I would come back at night, it's like 11 o'clock and I'd be like kind of wired. So I would basically write down like, okay, if I'm going to do a pizza tour, this is how I'm going to run it. These are the stops I'm going to make. This is what I would talk about. And it wasn't just about finding the top 4 pizzerias or anything like that, because if they were all sort of the same pizza, people would pick, well, stop 2 is my favorite. The other 3 were fine, or something like it. It really had to show the evolution of pizza and showcase the different styles that Chicago does well. So that was really more of the intention of it. And it took me a little while to get going, but by the time we incorporated, it was January of 2010. And I was ready to roll, but I ended up buying a small 15 passenger 450 that was probably an old Pace bus or something like that. And I'm like, all right. And I got a website that I built from a Yahoo template, and food tours aren't really a thing. There's a few that exist, but it's not well known. And I'm like, all right, so let me do this. But first I got to get insurance for this bus. And nobody would insure the bus. Nobody knew like how that business was supposed to go or anything like that. Like, wait a minute, you're feeding people, but you're not a restaurant. You're driving people around, but you're not a limo company. Like, I don't know how to bind this policy. It took me 4 months to get someone that would do the policy. And the real kicker was that the insurance was more expensive than the bus. And it wasn't like, and it wasn't like your regular car insurance where you can make monthly payments. They need it all up front. So it was like I bought 2 buses. I had enough money to buy 1 bus, and then I ended up having to buy 2 buses. So I was all in.
Yeah, that's wild. And then it just kind of obviously like blossomed from there. And
yeah, I would say like in the first year, we ended up taking out somewhere around like 800 people or so, which was great. I mean, to me, it felt like a lot of people. But at the end of the day, it was really more of a glorified lemonade stand. The first month of the second year, we ended up taking out more than 500 people in that month alone. And I had been noticing in that first year that a lot of people were just getting beers, cocktails along the way. So we started offering a Thursday night, Saturday night pizza and cocktails, which then led to companies seeking us out and saying, hey, can you, instead of us booking a dinner for Thursday night, can you take us to 3 pizzerias and get us food and drinks along the way and all this? And a light bulb goes off. You're like, yeah. And I think your budget that you would have for a restaurant would be X amount. This is pizza. It's being shared amongst a lot of people. I can do this at a much less price, still charge a good amount. And that's really where we took it from like glorified lemonade stand to actual business.
Wow, that's really, really cool. And I also love what you were saying about how so many are locals that are just like really interested in learning more about like the pizza culture in their own city. I think that's really, really nice. And yeah, just, I mean, like hearing you talk about all that is just like all so nostalgic and brings all that back. So I love that. Do you have any recommendations for people visiting Chicago, whether it's like food, besides your pizza tour, obviously, like whether it's food related or just something that like maybe isn't on Google, that's like not.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to knock out some of the stuff downtown, my favorites are the Art Institute, the Museum of Science and Industry, which is actually not downtown. It's down in Jackson Park. But after that, really genuinely go pick a neighborhood and explore that neighborhood. Go to Bucktown, and you can go up and down Milwaukee Avenue, and there's all different types of food represented, all different types of businesses represented. Pick Andersonville on the far north side.
Yeah.
If you go to where the big buildings are and you see the Bean and you do all that, just spend 1 day doing it. You can knock that all out in 1 day. Go to Navy Pier, do all that, and then spend the rest of your Chicago trip exploring some of the great neighborhoods. Now, I will say be careful about which neighborhoods you pick. Stay within the nicer neighborhoods for the most part, but like, your Lincoln Parks, your Lakeviews, your Andersonville, Bucktown, Uptown, and you'll know, like you just see a lot of people out with strollers and really nice places and breweries and secondhand shops and stuff. So people ask me all the time what I recommend in Chicago, and it's tough because I'm like, well, I live here, so I grocery shop and work here and, go to my kids' events and stuff like that. So it can be tough for me to recommend, but like, what do you like to do? try and do that in Chicago as well. It's a city that's very accepting and very easy to get around in as well.
Yeah, no, those are great suggestions. And there's a question that I do like to ask everybody that comes on.
Okay.
And what would your last meal be?
Ooh, that's tough. It's probably going to be pizza. Am I limited to like one spot though? Like, oof, we going like electric chair style. Like I got one thing to eat before I get the chair.
Yeah, I mean, you can have like an app or a dessert, like if you want as well, but you can't choose like eggplant parm, a lasagna, and a pizza. Like that doesn't count.
I think I would go with the first partner I ever called on for the pizza tour was a place called Coal Fire on Grand Avenue. And it was like the first time where I tried a different style of pizza, and like my eyes were wide. Like, wow, this isn't tavern style. This isn't deep dish, but it's really, really good. So I would get a meal from there. I would get their Caesar salad. I would probably just do just a straight up sausage pie. They do the one with the cheese first, the sauce on top, and the sausage on top of that. And then I'd get a slice of Bang Bang pie. They partner with Bang Bang pie there, and whatever seasonal pie that they've got on there. I think Coal Fire might be my last meal.
That's an excellent, excellent choice. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on. This was like so much fun and so interesting. Can you tell everybody how to find you, find your tours, connect with you, and learn more about all the pizza to be eaten in Chicago?
Yes, well, thank you for having me, first of all. And you guys can find me, ChicagoPizzaTours.com is the main website. You can get your tickets there. You can find out all the information about all the different tours we run, contact form if you have follow-up questions on something like that. Most active on Instagram at Chicago Pizza Tours. The name just says it all, basically. So if you DM me, I will see it eventually. I will get back to you. I answer all of them. We do have a Facebook page. I'm not as active on that, but Chicago Pizza Tour, that's like facebook.com/Chicago Pizza Tour. But yeah, those are the best avenues to find me. Or just Google me. Just Google Chicago Pizza Tours. It'll come up.
Yeah, I'm going to link all of this stuff anyway, like in the show notes, so people can like easily click on it and find it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to go eat pizza now.
Yeah, you should. I am. You definitely should.
If you haven't been to Chicago, I cannot recommend it enough. From the music to the architecture to, of course, the food, it's just really, 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 really good vibes. It's a powerful reminder that food is never just food. It's history, community, and pride all baked into one. Whether it's deep dish, tavern style, or the incredible range of cuisines across all the city's neighborhoods, Chicago shows us how travel can start with a single bite. Make sure to check out John's Pizza Tours. Everything is linked in the show notes per usual. And please share all your pizza eats with me. I love living and eating vicariously through you guys. Make sure you're following on YouTube and or wherever you're listening to this from so you don't miss a thing. Until next time, bye.